The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the rugged mountains of the Wild West. It was the summer of 1802, and the air was thick with the scent of pine trees and wildflowers. The mountains were both beautiful and unforgiving, a place where survival was a daily challenge. Nestled within these towering peaks lived Hank, a mountain man known for his strength and independence. His wooden barn stood proudly against the backdrop of jagged cliffs, home to chickens that clucked and roamed freely. One scorching afternoon, as Hank tended to his chores, he noticed the stillness around him. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. But then a soft noise caught his attention, a whisper of movement near his barn. He narrowed his eyes and approached cautiously. Inside, he found a young woman with dark hair and worn clothes, her hands trembling as she reached for eggs nestled in a straw nest. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Hank shouted, startling her. The woman turned wide-eyed, realizing she had been caught red-handed. Maylin stood frozen in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. Just moments ago, she had been focused on the eggs, hoping to find something to eat for herself. At 25 years old, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Since losing her husband to illness, life had become a daily struggle. With no family to turn to, she wandered the land, searching for food and a way to survive. Desperation had driven her to the mountain man's barn. The sight of the eggs nestled in the straw had sparked hope in her heart, but now, caught by Hank, that hope seemed lost. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't mean to steal. I haven't eaten in days." Seeing her fear and the vulnerability in her voice, Hank softened slightly. He had faced his own struggles and understood desperation. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked, his tone shifting. Maylin hung her head, knowing pride had kept her from reaching out. She sighed, feeling small and defeated, yet a flicker of hope remained in her heart. As Maylin approached the barn, her heart raced with a mix of fear and guilt. She knew stealing was wrong, but hunger gnawed at her stomach, pushing her to take the risk. The sun beat down on her back as she glanced around, ensuring Hank wasn't watching. "Just a few eggs," she whispered to herself, trying to justify her actions. "I can't go on like this." Inside the barn, she spotted the chickens clucking softly, blissfully unaware of her presence. Her hands trembled as she reached for an egg, feeling its smooth shell against her fingertips. Each moment felt like a thief's eternity, and guilt washed over her like a heavy cloud. "What if he catches me?" she thought, imagining Hank's stern face. Yet the thought of going another day without food drove her forward. As she carefully placed the eggs in her small cloth bag, Maylin couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line. "I'm sorry," she murmured to the chickens, wishing for a way out of her desperate situation. In that moment, she felt both shame and determination. Survival had become her only choice. Hank was a mountain man carved from the rugged landscape itself. With broad shoulders and a weathered face, he had spent years living alone among the towering peaks and dense forests. His long, unkempt beard and piercing blue eyes spoke of a life filled with hard work and solitude. The mountains were his home, and he understood their ways like the back of his hand. Every day he rose with the sun, tending to his small farm and caring for the chickens in his wooden barn. Hank preferred the company of nature over people, finding peace in the sounds of rustling leaves and the calls of distant animals. Yet beneath his tough exterior lay a man who had faced loss and hardship. He had once loved deeply, but had lost everything to the unforgiving grip of fate. As he surveyed his land, Hank felt a familiar sense of loneliness creeping in. But today was different. He sensed a shift in the air, an unexpected presence near his barn. Little did he know that this encounter would change his solitary life forever. "What's happening out there?" he muttered to himself, gripping his hat as he prepared to investigate. As Hank stepped closer to the barn, he could hear the faint rustle of straw. His instincts kicked in, and he quietly pushed the door open wider. What he saw made his heart race. A young woman, May Lynn, crouched down, clutching a handful of eggs as if they were gold. "Stop right there," he boomed, his voice echoing through the barn. May Lynn jumped, her eyes widening with fear as she dropped the eggs back into the nest. She knew she had been caught, and her stomach sank at the sight of Hank's stern expression. "You're coming with me," he commanded, taking a step forward. The authority in his voice was undeniable, but beneath it lay curiosity about this scared woman before him. "Please, I'm sorry," May Lynn pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't mean any harm. I just needed something to eat." Hank hesitated for a moment, observing her desperation and vulnerability. He had been there before, but this was different. "Come on," he said softly, yet firmly. "Let's talk." With that, he gestured for her to follow him outside, ready to learn more about her story. As Hank reached out and grabbed May Lynn's arm, panic surged through her body. His grip was firm and commanding, and she felt a wave of fear wash over her. "Please, I didn't mean any harm," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "I was just so hungry." Tears began to pool in her eyes as desperation clawed at her throat. May Lynn had never imagined she would be caught like this. The stern look on Hank's face sent shivers down her spine, and she fought to compose herself. "I lost my husband, and since then I've been all alone," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't eaten in days." Hank studied her closely, searching for signs of deceit, but finding only sincerity in her eyes. He could see the shadows of hardship etched across her face, and his heart softened a little. "You don't need to steal," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "I can help you, but you have to trust me." May Lynn looked up at him, hope flickering within her as she considered his words. Would this mountain man really offer her help? As Hank looked into May Lynn's tear-filled eyes, memories of his own struggles flooded back. He recalled the darker days of his life when he had felt just as lost and desperate. The pain of losing loved ones weighed heavily on him, and he knew what it was like to face hardships alone in the unforgiving mountains. In that moment, he felt a shift within himself. Instead of seeing May Lynn as just a thief, he recognized her as a fellow survivor. "I remember what it's like to be hungry," he said quietly, his voice softer than before. "You don't need to steal from me." Hank wrestled with his instincts. He could easily punish her for taking his eggs, but he sensed that she needed compassion more than punishment. He wanted to show her kindness, but didn't want to seem weak or foolish. After a long pause, he took a deep breath and decided to extend a hand instead of a fist. "Let's find you some food," he offered gently. "I can help you get back on your feet." As he spoke those words, Hank felt warmth spreading in his heart, realizing that helping her might heal some of his own wounds too. Hank led May Lynn through the winding paths of the mountains, guiding her toward his cabin. The air was fresh and filled with the sound of chirping birds, but May Lynn's heart raced with uncertainty. "Are you sure I can stay?" she asked hesitantly. "Of course," Hank replied, glancing back at her with a reassuring smile. "I've got enough room, and I know how to teach you ways to survive out here." As they reached the cabin, May Lynn marveled at its sturdy structure nestled among the trees. It was simple yet cozy, with smoke curling from the chimney. Hank opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "This is home," he said. Inside, he showed her a few supplies: dried meat, vegetables from his small garden, and a collection of simple tools. "You'll learn to gather food from nature," Hank explained. "There are berries and roots in these woods that you can eat. I'll show you how to set traps for small game, too." May Lynn felt a flicker of hope as she listened. "Thank you, Hank," she said softly, realizing that perhaps this mountain man could guide her to a better life after all. As May Lynn stepped into Hank's cabin, her apprehension mingled with a sense of hope. The air inside was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chill she had felt outside. The simple wooden walls were adorned with a few practical items, a shelf lined with jars of preserved food, a small table with mismatched chairs, and a cozy fireplace crackling gently in the corner. She looked around, taking in the details. The cabin was not grand, but it felt comfortable, as though it had been built to keep out the harshness of the mountains. A woven rug lay on the wooden floor, and sunlight streamed through the small window, casting a golden glow on everything. "It's nice," she whispered, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. Hank noticed her taking it all in and smiled softly. "It's not much, but it's home," he said. "You'll learn to make it work for you." Maylin nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Maybe this place could be a fresh start for her, a chance to rebuild her life and find her way again among the towering pines and open skies. As they settled in the cabin, Hank and Maylin began to share stories about their lives. Hank started, his voice filled with nostalgia. "I grew up in a small town, but life pushed me into these mountains when I lost my family," he confessed. "I found peace here, but it hasn't always been easy." Maylin listened intently, feeling a connection as he spoke. "I understand loss," she replied softly. "I lost my husband to illness last year. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet." Her eyes glistened with tears as she recounted her struggles and the immense solitude that followed. Hank nodded empathetically, recognizing the pain in her words. "Survival seems lonely sometimes, but we can make it work together," he encouraged her, feeling a growing bond between them. They continued exchanging stories late into the evening, laughing at shared experiences and finding comfort in each other's company. In those moments of vulnerability, a friendship began to blossom, a connection forged through hardship and understanding that offered both of them a glimmer of hope for brighter days ahead. The next morning, Maylin awoke to the sound of birds singing outside. She stretched and felt grateful for the warm blanket around her. As she glanced around the cabin, she decided that she wanted to contribute to Hank's kindness. "What can I do to help?" she asked when she found him tending to the fire. Hank looked up, surprised but pleased. "Well, there's always chores to be done. If you gather some firewood, I can start preparing breakfast," he suggested. Eager to be useful, Maylin nodded and set out to collect small branches from the nearby trees. She worked diligently, feeling a sense of purpose as she filled her arms with wood. Once back inside, she placed the sticks by the fire, wiping her brow with satisfaction. "Thank you," Hank said with a smile. "You're doing great." As they prepared breakfast together, Maylin helped chop vegetables from Hank's garden and set the table with simple but hearty food. Their shared efforts made the cabin feel more like home, and she felt a warmth grow in her heart, not just from gratitude for shelter and food, but from the deepening bond between them. As the days passed, Hank realized it was time to teach Maylin more about living harmoniously with nature. One morning, he approached her with a smile. "Today we're going to gather eggs the right way," he said. Maylin looked curious but nervous, remembering her previous mistake. "Are you sure I can do it?" she asked hesitantly. "Absolutely," Hank replied with confidence. "It's all about respect for the chickens and their space." He led her to the coop, where the hens clucked softly, pecking at the ground. "First, we need to be calm and quiet," he instructed. "Chickens can sense fear and excitement." As they approached the nesting area, Hank showed her how to gently lift a hen if necessary and locate eggs without startling them. "Always thank them for their gifts," he added lightly. Maylin followed his lead, feeling more at ease as she gathered the warm eggs from their nests. "This feels different," she said, smiling brightly. "I'm not just taking, I'm working together with them." Hank nodded approvingly, enjoying her newfound appreciation. "Exactly. Nature has a way of teaching us." In that moment, Maylin felt a deep connection with both the animals and her new life alongside Hank. As the days turned into weeks, Maylin began to feel more at home in the mountains. The once intimidating landscape transformed into a familiar sanctuary where she found strength and confidence. Each morning she would rise with the sun, her heart swelling with gratitude for the life Hank had encouraged her to embrace. "Look at how strong you've become," Hank remarked one morning as they worked together in the garden. Maylin smiled, feeling proud of her progress. She was no longer just a widow wandering aimlessly. She was learning to cultivate the land and care for the animals that surrounded her. With every task, from gathering eggs to tending to the garden, she felt herself growing stronger and more capable. The once timid woman who had snuck into the barn now moved with purpose and determination. "I never thought I could do this," she admitted during a quiet moment. Hank nodded, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You can do anything you set your mind to." Encouraged by his words, Maylin realized that she was not just surviving, she was thriving, finding hope and happiness in her new life among the mountains. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Hank and Maylin sat side by side on a wooden bench outside the cabin. The beauty of the sunset enveloped them, casting a warm glow over their faces. "Isn't it lovely?" Maylin said, her voice filled with wonder. "I never knew sunsets could be so beautiful." Hank smiled, appreciating her enthusiasm. "They remind me that every day can end beautifully, no matter how tough it might have been." As they watched the colors shift in the sky, Hank shared his hopes for a better future. "I dream of expanding this farm someday, maybe even helping others who find themselves lost like you did." Maylin turned to him, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "That sounds wonderful. I've always dreamed of adventure beyond these mountains. Perhaps one day I could explore places I've never seen before." Hank looked at her thoughtfully. "With your spirit, I have no doubt you'll find those adventures." In that moment, both felt a sense of possibility, dreams intertwined under the vastness of the sky, binding their hopes together as friends and newfound companions. One bright morning, Maylin stood outside the cabin, staring toward the distant mountains. A flicker of uncertainty gnawed at her heart as she thought of her old life, how she had wandered, lost and hungry, before meeting Hank. She felt a pull to return to the familiarity of her past, yet another part of her yearned to embrace the new life she had begun to build with him. "Hank," she called out hesitantly as he approached, "what if I return to my village? I could find my old life again." He stopped and looked at her with concern. "You have a home here now, Maylin. You've built something strong among these mountains." Maylin felt torn. "But what if I can't really change? What if this is just a dream?" Hank stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes embracing a new path means letting go of the past. You are capable of so much more than you realize." Taking a deep breath, she weighed her choices. Would she return to her former life or seize the chance for adventure and hope with Hank? In that moment, Maylin knew that whatever decision she made would shape her future forever. As Maylin stood outside the cabin, she took a deep breath and reflected on everything that had changed in her life since meeting Hank. The thought of returning to her old village felt increasingly distant. The memories of loneliness and despair no longer held power over her heart. Instead, she felt a sense of belonging in the mountains, surrounded by nature and a newfound purpose. "I can't go back," she whispered to herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "I've found something here I didn't even know I was searching for." Hank approached, sensing her contemplation. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. "I've realized that this place is my home now," Maylin replied, her voice steady. "You've become like family to me." Hank smiled warmly, his pride evident. "And you are family to me too," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. With those words, Maylin felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She understood now that embracing this new life with Hank meant letting go of the past. Here, in the mountains, she had found not just safety, but also hope, love, and a future worth living for. As the seasons changed, Maylin and Hank flourished together in their mountain home. Their partnership had grown strong, built on mutual respect and shared experiences as they tended to the land and raised the animals that surrounded them. Each day felt like a new adventure, filled with laughter and hard work that strengthened their bond. One sunny afternoon, they sat on the porch, watching the chickens roam freely in the yard. "I never imagined I could feel so at peace," Maylin said, her eyes sparkling with contentment. "This place feels like home." Hank nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "We've created something special here, haven't we? A life that's meaningful." Together, they cultivated not just crops, but also a sense of belonging, a family forged in the heart of nature. They respected each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, celebrating their triumphs and learning from their challenges. Maylin looked out at the mountains towering majestically before them. "I've found joy in this life," she said softly. "Thank you for helping me discover it." Hank placed his hand over hers, knowing that together they had built a future filled with harmony and happiness in their little corner of the world.